Good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome. Thanks for coming out. Wow, what an incredible crowd today. This is pretty incredible that you guys are here and that you want to be here and that you're anxious to see what's going on with this lecture. For those of you that know, there was a firm back a while ago, a couple of years back, named Archigram. And Archigram had, one of their principals was Peter Cook. And Peter Cook is famous for saying that when he's asked what architecture is, his response is, architecture is enthusiasm. And one of the things I think that was demonstrated over the weekend was that there was an incredible amount of enthusiasm here, and particularly north of the building these pallet constructions. The ringleader for the enthusiasm, we must acknowledge, is Dr. Wes Janz, and he's going to come up in a minute to introduce the speakers. So I think before we continue at all, I think we owe Wes a show of our enthusiasm, which he's a big part of. No, I was saying thank you. Guess who's next? A couple of important things that we need to announce is that following this talk, there's going to be a reception out in Pallet Village, north of the building, and that reception is sponsored by AIAS. Also, Glue has had a big part in sponsoring this event as well. There's a little enthusiastic sign that's coming up out of the front row here. They're going to be out there. They also have issues of Glue available for those of you that are interested in that. So take a look for the guy in the England shirt, the red shirt, you can't miss him, and the big Glue sign. They'll be out there as well. And thank you for your support for this event. And finally, once again, for Dr. Janz, for his enthusiasm, but also for him catering a lot of the food events that took place over the weekend. And Marcia also came up and was a big part of that as well. Driving back and forth to the store, getting food, getting all kinds of nourishment for all the participants. A lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff that you're really not aware of was shouldered by Dr. Janz, and we also owe him a debt of gratitude for that. So don't clap. He doesn't want it. But I'd like to invite out Dr. Janz to introduce you to our special guests tonight.
Thank you. A dream is just as real as reality. Before introducing today's lecturers, I want to thank the core workers from the Timber Pallet Village Workshop. Thanks to Brooke Lucock, who is a team leader, Sohit, Steve, Liz, Kurt, and Jeremy, to team leader Amal Cavender, Jody, Tulai, Nithin, Robbie, Ben, and Adam. Thanks to Anna DeBrea, another team leader, and Joel, Matt, Eugenia, Joshua, and Yevgen. Thanks to Kyle Harden for being a team leader, Ryan, Chris, Lisa, Jason, to Kevin Klinger. He's got some enthusiasm as well. Thanks to him for being a team leader. And Adrienne, Chad, Charmalie, Matt, and Jeremy. And finally, thanks to Tim Gray, who was a team leader, and his posse here. Rob, Heather, Nehal, Adam, John, Jory, AJ, and Travis. Thanks to all of you. And anybody else? A dream is just as real as reality. 10,000 people move to Istanbul, Turkey every week. It's unrelenting and might not change in your lifetime. 10,000 people move to Istanbul, Turkey every week. 80% of the world's population lives in a developing country. 80%. 2.5 billion people, almost half of the world's population, doesn't have electricity. In Sri Lanka, garbage is a new concept. There's no comparable word in the main language of the country, which is Sinhalese. Imagine a country that doesn't have a word for garbage. 25% of the annual U.S. landfill waste stream is from construction and demolition projects done at the guidance of architects. Such facts challenge our conventional ideas of what planning is, what designers do, and what buildings architects should work on, if they should even be working on buildings. How do you plan for 10,000 new people every week? What should we do with the 7,000 vacant houses that exist in Indianapolis? Maybe we should dream, or shift our senses of reality, or experience the realness in the lives of others. A dream is just as real as reality. I'm very pleased to introduce Azin, Valy, and Suzan Wines, partners in I-Beam Design. Both Azin and Suzan attended Cooper Union and graduated in 1990. Suzan teaches at Cooper Union. This year she's teaching a first-year design studio. They formed I-Beam Design in 1998, immediately after winning an first prize in the international competition for the redesign of Lieutenant Petrosino Park in Lower Manhattan. Their proposal for transitional refugee housing for returning refugees of Kosovo in a competition sponsored by Architecture for Humanity was cited as a notable entry. Its usage of timber pallets, I think, is, for what it's worth, is simple, sensible, and I think remarkable. This work, this particular project, connects very strongly with the ongoing explorations of a number of our graduate students, people who are interested in other leftover people, leftover spaces, and leftover materials. This linkage, as much as any other, brought Azin and Suzan to Ball State. In the just completed 4-day timber pallet workshop, 35 persons, including faculty members, alums, graduate students, and architecture students from the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th year classes, designed and constructed the timber pallet village that Kevin referred to, which is just to the north of our building. As Azin said this morning, a dream is just as real as reality. The title of today's lecture is Pallet Tricks and Other Matrix. Please join me in welcoming Azin, Valy, and Suzan Wines.
Thank you very much, all of you, for inviting us here, and particularly Wes for his unending supply of energy and enthusiasm and generosity, which he certainly has shared with us and seems to share with everybody in the school. I can't imagine the school where I come from, where Azin and I met and where I'm currently teaching, creating a situation where alumni of different generations would come back to collaborate on a project like this together with students of all different levels. I've never experienced such a wonderful galvanizing spirit as I have in this school over this past weekend. And I must say, when actually Wes's students approached us, I think probably a year and a half ago, somehow they found us. I don't know. We thought we were hiding on 29th Street, but somehow we got these emails suddenly from Indiana and began a communication through the students, and then with Wes, who came to visit us. Also some other students who graduated from last year came to visit us. And finally we organized this, but I never really believed when we were talking about it that in 3 days you guys could create such a wonderful world out there. And I want to congratulate you most of all and thank you so much for this opportunity. I guess I basically sort of will start with a brief overview of our work and then get in more into the Pallet House project, which seems to be the main theme of this weekend. Azin and I, like Wes mentioned, met in school, and then we sort of went our separate ways after graduation. And sort of we found each other again at the licensing exam, an experience which we were happy to forget shortly after we started working together. We won a competition, the first competition we ever did, or first time we ever worked together, for a little park, which we'll show you. But most of all, what was kind of great was by accident, we sort of came together to work on this project and ended up having a fabulous time working together. We were drawing on the same drawing at the same time, getting engaged in a dialogue through the drawing, through the work, through the model building. And we sort of realized, maybe we should take this opportunity and think about, we both had our dreams of eventually having our own firm. So it took about a year or two before we kind of finished our responsibilities in other offices and finally opened our office. This lawn is our first office. Azin, who is originally from Iran, a desert country, always wanted a lawn. So when we were discussing, well, we have $50, what can we do in our office for $50? We need to build some cabinets to put the catalogs and all the mess inside. And we had a lot of windows, which is actually why we opened the office in the first place. We found a space that had windows. We didn't have any jobs. We couldn't really afford it, but we said, well, it's got a lot of light, and she wants a lawn. And so we built these cabinets, and we put a lawn in the cabinets. After a while, we sort of decided we'd try something else, and the office evolved into that. We grew herbs and flowers, and sometimes we'd cook from our garden. So that was sort of our meager beginnings in our first office. Now we're in a slightly bigger office upstairs in the same building, but not as many windows. What really got us started was a competition for Lieutenant Petrosino Park, which is basically this little traffic island that is out just across the street from Storefront for Art and Architecture, which is one of the only galleries that shows the work of young architects in New York. And they decided, they're also well known, they have this wonderful opening and closing facade that was designed in collaboration with Vito Acconci and Stephen Hall. So if you ever come to New York, you gotta visit Storefront. Hopefully it'll still be there. Anyway, they had this idea that they wanted to sort of intervene into the community, and they asked the Parks Department, can we have a competition for your park over here that's sorely neglected and unsettled and so on, with many subways running underneath. So they had a competition, and because all the young architects, like all our professors, were always having exhibitions at Storefront, a lot of people, hundreds of people entered it from around the world, and we started working on it. Actually, my father, of James Wines of Site, which you've all maybe heard of or studied, people who did those wild crumbling buildings in the 1970s, and now he's doing a lot of sustainable and green architecture. He was supposed to be on the jury, and Azin said, well, let's do this. We got this idea about this hanging garden. And I said, but my dad's on the jury, I can't. She said, it's anonymous, don't worry about it. Besides, he's supposed to be lecturing in Saudi Arabia and somewhere else, so let's just do it. And so it was sort of funny, because I was working in a big corporate office at KPF at the time, plus helping my father, plus doing this, and had to keep this big secret. And then when my dad came, actually he was away, so we had no idea about the whole thing. We snuck his camera equipment out to photograph the model. And when he came back, he went to the gallery and he says, oh, that's a nice project. Wines? What? I didn't do this project. So he was rather surprised about that. But we had a great time working, and basically we looked at this traffic island, and we saw the opportunity to make a hanging garden there. Formerly, it's kind of all like Madison Avenue now, but formerly this traffic island really made a distinction between Chinatown to the south and Little Italy to the east and Soho to the west. And there was really three distinct neighborhoods if you know New York from 10 years ago or before. And also, since it was surrounded by a fence and streets and so on, we wanted to break through that, like make more of a European piazza so that the life of the people living in the buildings would spill into the park, and the life of the park would spill into the private life of the people living around it. So we proposed this hanging garden. And then you had this matrix on which all the different communities around, we figured that they could intervene in it in different ways. So there's right next, a block away, there's this Italian festival that they have every year where they hang all these lights and things in the streets, and at Christmas time. So we thought the Italians could do their San Gennaro festival there, or Christmas decorations. And the Chinese could have a Chinese New Year and hang lanterns and dragons and signs and things. And the Soho artists could hang screens and have video festivals there and film festivals and things like this. So this was sort of the initial idea of the proposal that won. which still isn't realized. It's a public park. It hasn't been funded yet, and hopefully someday it will be, and they'll contact us. And then we further developed to have a connection with the surrounding buildings. Want to talk about this a little bit?
Well, the floor plan layout of the park, or this traffic island, is based on the folding of the three facades of the three neighborhoods onto this triangle. And then go to the next one. So the windows became planter boxes, and the cornices became seatings, doorways became fountains. Go to the next one.
So you end up having this landscape of architectural elements that are all memories or carrying narrative stories from the history of the neighborhood.
It's like a little archaeological finding within this garden.
So from this point, we eventually opened our office and started working on small projects that we would get, some residential, some commercial projects, which we'll show you. But this idea of bringing green into the lives of city dwellers in New York, greenery and integrating sustainable systems and green building systems into urban condition has always interested us. So from the first competition we did, this is actually one of the more recent competitions that we did last year for a housing project in Manchester, England. And we were, the site is along a riverfront, and we were particularly excited about two things. We actually took a little trip for a couple of days and went to visit the site.
One of those times that we didn't have any projects and had a little bit of pocket money, decided, let's do this competition. Let's just go over there and see the site. Kind of like that's how it started with the Petrosino Park, because we just went and sat there and just drew and looked at it and felt it and studied and researched the site. And we felt like the only way to do it properly is to just take a flight over there and just spend a couple of days on the site sketching, thinking, drawing. And so once we went there, we've been studying a bit more about the site and the history of the city, Manchester being historically known for its canals, man-made canals. And then we also, taking the train over there, we kept noticing these small barges that farmers use in order to take their produce to the cities.
The second photo up. These kind of typical barges that we saw all the way from London to Manchester on the train, because these canals go all the way through the landscape. And the landscape is really, really green. We thought it'd sort of be, cold and miserable, but all that rain makes it green all the time, very lush and green.
So these were some of the reference images that we started out with, the existing landscape of that region, which is platforms of greenery with these stone retaining walls, and how the landscape and the buildings merge with each other, and also these barges, and that how there's this system of canals that connects towns and cities to each other. And we wanted to revive the notion of using these canals and using these barges to connect the whole country together, and particularly this part of Manchester to the rest of the city.
So we had the river site and on one side, and then we proposed to cut another man-made canal on the back side of the house, which is actually the side that you approach from the street. And this gave the opportunity to have the canal side apartments to also have a mobile summer home in the form of one of these barges, which are starting to become sort of popular amongst sort of young nomadic people and other people. It's they only cost probably about $50,000, and you can have this mobile home and go live in London if there's work, and then go to Manchester and Liverpool. You can travel the entire country. In fact, you can also go down to the south of France on these canals. They all connect. So we thought we would give these canal side apartments these barge houses that could plug into them. And then in the sketches above, you see how they can plug in, and then you can close the barge and go for a summer vacation with your family when the weather is nice.
So it basically took the middle portion and made a skylight out of it that's able to open and connect, plug into the duplex apartment.
The other thing we thought was that you could have a number of floating programs going on, one of which would be a floating market that would come from the countryside and float in to the site. You'd have a floating market, and then they would, once or twice a week, and then they would float away off to some other part of England or another part of the city.
Also, for the purpose of this competition, they were asking for residential, commercial, and recreational use for this site. So the housing was one aspect. The bringing the barges in and having a market there was another component. And then the next one was entertainment. And we incorporated within this pool in the middle of the site. First of all, we cut around the edges of the site going along the river so that it's more approachable by pedestrians, that they can sit around on the steps near the water. And then we brought the water into the site in the middle and created this pool where in the summertime it's used as a swimming pool with restaurants or stores along the sides and sunbathing areas. And then Manchester is also known for its music and performances, so we created this floating performance stage so that people can sit around and enjoy the performance. And in the wintertime, it would function as an ice skating rink.
And basically everybody would get an apartment with an apartment with a lawn in front of it, so everyone would sort of have a public-private lawn. And the idea of this competition was sort of that Manchester had been this big industrial town, it had these canals, it had this industrial infrastructure, and people were now leaving and going to the suburbs. And they Manchester was looking for a new contemporary identity for the 21st century and trying to attract people sort of back from the suburbs into the city to work there. So we decided we would sort of make this kind of ideal blend of suburban living. You get your lawn, you get your green, you get your water, you get your canals and your lit rivers, but at the same time you're in a rather dense urban situation with all the amenities that the city has, walking distance away or boating distance away. Another thing we wanted to do on part of the site was there's a little piece of site over here and a little piece of site over up there. This part is a place where you can repair barges and a dry dock where you can paint them and lift them out of the water or other boats. And we also wanted to, as part of our proposal, reinstate the use of the barges as a public transportation system, because the car traffic is really terrible in Manchester. So once again, back to Azin's original desire to have grass in the middle of the city. This is sort of an extension of our original lawn that we had in our office out across the landscape of Manchester, England.
Did you mention the outdoor theater?
Oh, and the third other water program was we have the floating market, we have the ice skating, we have the swimming pool, and then we would have a floating theater company that would have their offices and rehearsal spaces above the dry dock, and then they would have a barge that they could float around the city and around the country and perform on.
Now, did we talk about the cinema where the barges are?
Oh, that's back here. And across the canal, you could also project and have a little outdoor cinema on
the steps that function for locals coming and buying the produce from the farmers in the evenings in the summertime could be used as seating and for viewing the outdoor movies.
So this is a project, we didn't win this competition, but we are still working. We're still working on it and working on developing it. We're in contact with some different engineers that are helping us with it. Burrow Happold, big engineering firm from England, who's doing a lot of sustainable systems, green roof systems and things. And we're hoping to maybe eventually get with a developer and develop it on our own somewhere, which is sort of our recently new approach. But now we'll move on to a couple of built projects. Most of our built projects are in New York City, which consists of doing a lot of refurbishment and renovation projects. This is an apartment renovation that we did recently, and usually similar to the palette house in a way. We usually kind of go look at a space. We don't really go there with any preconceived notion other than what maybe the client would tell us. And we try to, assess the space for what it is and then come up with some fairly simple matrix or few elements that will solve all the programmatic problems and questions, all the structural problems and questions being given in the project. So in this case, we basically created a ribbon of program that goes around. There's a main circulation space, and we sort of created a ribbon of different programs that goes around the space. So if you
Actually, one of the requirements for this project is because the client had a dog, and she was very concerned that all her furniture was going to get ruined by the dog, and so she wanted everything to be black leather, and every single thing wanted to be black leather. So the dog kind of ruled. This was the client in a way, and also she loved modernist furniture. She also had a couch by Eileen Gray, and of course these. And so we just based it on the color black, which is ribboning as a counter. And she also had needed a lot of storage space. So that was the most important thing for her. So we just went around and created this ribbon of cabinetry, because she works in the space as well as living with her daughter and husband and dog. So the project became about storage space and this ribboning that goes around the entire length of this one space, but creates different zones within it. So on that side, that's her office. It turns into the dining area, then the living area, and then that's the office again, coming back, goes into the breakfast room, there's the powder room, back to the living room.
So this is sort of the basic palette of materials, just 3 or 4 materials that make the whole space. And this is how it begins to weave in the powder room, out of the powder room, down toward the kitchen area, into the breakfast area, out of the breakfast area. There's the dog, the star of the house. She's a real estate agent, so she works at home, so she's got these two workstations at home. She was very interested in having a lot of built-in furniture, everything being kind of built-in,
And now
very
half of it
clean.
is actually empty. She was so paranoid about not having enough storage space, and now she has so much storage space, she doesn't know what to do with it.
This is another apartment. Actually, it's a big loft renovation that we did in New York City, in which it was sort of a similar case. The client came and started with the idea, oh, let's just change the kitchen around a little bit. But they're really wonderful clients, and we continue to work with them. We recently finished the roof deck of this loft, and then we may continue to do other work for them. But slowly, as we began to talk, they were very involved in the design. The husband's an engineer, and he was very interested in engineering all kinds of fun moving contraptions for the place. And the other requirement was that we could do anything we wanted after a certain point, but it had to always incorporate storage in one way or another. So the place that we started was at the kitchen and the kitchen cabinets. There's a mezzanine level, which has room for the children up there. And the kids, they're 2 twins, they're about 9 years old now, but they were like 6 at the time. They would always play on this stair that was there before. And so we thought, well, we want to do something kind of playful with the stair, so we made the glass stair coming down onto the kitchen counter, and then part of the kitchen counter and cabinetry can roll away and become a step ladder when you have to replace a light bulb somewhere else. Also, it's a way to, if the kids don't do their homework, they can't go to the playroom, so the parents pull away the thing, or the 2 twins play with each other and pull the stair away. So it sort of becomes a play element. I mean, it took pretty progressive parents to do a suspended glass stair with a moving bottom 4 treads, but we had a lot of fun with it, and the kids have never been hurt, and they have a great time playing with it and showing it off to their friends and so on. So that was the first element, and then we began to go elsewhere around the space. Also, there was a skylight above that wasn't being used, so we opened it up and made the glass stair. Then we redid the fireplace, but that also had to have storage everywhere, so every part of the mantelpiece opens up and for CDs and tapes and collection. They have some collection of antiques and jewelry and things like this.
Well, both these clients and the previous clients, they had so much fun throughout the process, and we had so much fun with them that they're ready to go to the next project. And I was telling them, I think you should live in this one for a while and move on later. But the first one you saw, she's just ready. She just moved there 6 months ago, and she's ready to go get another place and renovate them.
We also took out part of the bathroom where the sinks were in order to bring light through to the entry vestibule where you come out of the elevator. So basically this blue square that you see there, blue rectangle, is actually a fish tank built into the wall, and it's made of liquid crystal glass. So it goes into the bathroom, but if you don't want the people to see you in the bathroom, you just turn on the electricity and frost over the glass so people don't see you. They just see the fish and sort of the glow coming through. And then we built the bed which becomes the dresser, which becomes the vanity, which becomes the sinks. And then in the kids' bathroom, we made a funny kind of nightlight cabinet out of glowing acrylic and things like that. So what we tried to do in this case is, either find a material or a situation or a form that can be, it can be cabinetry, but it can be a bed, but it can be a dresser, but it can be a nightlight, but it can be the fish tank. So also the fish tank was a built-in wall, which also had storage all throughout it. So we always try to have things serve many different functions at one time. Another fairly simple project that we worked on a few years ago was for a wine bar and tapas bar in Soho, which is an area where the artists used to live, but now it's Bloomingdale's just moved there, so it's changing its nature. But this was a small building for a woman that we'd worked for her before on another restaurant. And she wanted to do a wine bar, and the nice opportunity that we saw here, while the building was very small, she wanted to have something downstairs in the basement and a dining area upstairs as well. The sidewalk came to a height that was a few feet below the first floor level, which often happens in New York, so you have a stoop going up. So we took advantage of that because she wanted to put people dining in the basement. So we cut back the first floor a little bit to allow light down into the space from the front facade, as well as to make a connection between the space. And to reinforce that connection, we made the bar with water flowing through it that then drops down and becomes a waterfall and connects to the space below. So the two bar dining areas are connected by this waterfall bar, as well as a wall to show off all the different wines for sale and tempt people to buy them, of course. And that wall that connects is simply made out of wine crates. And the rest of the space, we basically left the brick wall, the wood floors, the exposed wood joists. And so with just 2 or 3 elements or moves, it kind of solves spatial problems, it becomes entertaining, it shows off their product, it allows light to come down, it allows for to see out into the street from below, and for the people from the street to see into the bar. So we'd like to somehow have fun with these things and be a little bit playful and almost childlike in a way sometimes. And this is the back dining area upstairs, where the hearth becomes the bench that goes around the back part of the restaurant. We got into a period where we were liking to design a lot of restaurants.
Well, this was an Italian restaurant that was going to be open for lunch, breakfast, and dinner, and they wanted to have communal dining space. And we made some studies of components of Italian cuisine and the culture. So we introduced this long table that extends out, starts on the street, and folds out as a folding table where pedestrians can come up to the bartender and get a quick espresso as they're walking up, going to work. Or they can come in and basically that portion of the restaurant is the bar, and the floor rises up and becomes a dining height. And it goes into the kitchen, becomes a prep table for the chef, where they can slide the food down if they wanted to. Next. And the table functions as a light fixture itself, because we wanted to change the mood of the day from morning till the evening, so that the lights and intensity and the color changes throughout the night, or throughout the day. Also, as we were studying the components of Italian cuisine, we were really drawn to these Parmesan cheese molds. And so we decided to use the molds as our seating, to design chairs with them and stools. Also, these are pasta dies, and we wanted to do a collage of these for a wall screen where it would allow light to shimmer through it. So the bathroom walls will be made out of this, kind of indicating if there's someone, if it's occupied or not. And of course the grappa bottles, they're so beautiful. We wanted to use them as our light fixtures. Different size, shape bottles will be used as that. And also the idea of the pasta making process to be exposed throughout the dining experience, so you actually witness what goes through making of the dinner you're having.
The client was very interested in, making a real kind of a very Italian place. Not so much, you find many Italian-American places in New York, but they wanted to really celebrate all the process and love and culture of food that you have in Italy. And they also wanted, to have an open kitchen, and then they were going to sell the pasta and sell the olive oil and Parmesan cheese and stuff. So there were display shelves, which then become the stairs going up to the mezzanine level to display the different food products. So it's kind of a bit of a market, but also a continuous bar restaurant. Part of this continuous bar thing is very much sort of the current culture in New York. There are an awful lot of single people between the ages of 25 and 45 years old who are always out dining by themselves in restaurants. So the idea of having one long bar that becomes a dining table, that becomes a cafe, would allow all these poor single lonely people to have others to eat with, and that way maybe they might meet somebody, and then they could get, have a little date even though they didn't intend it. So it's kind of an, inopportune date that just happens by chance, which are always the best ones anyway.
This is a nightclub that we proposed for a client. We wanted to have a galactical experience, kind of a surreal experience as they enter in. And we proposed to do that with a series of bubbles, like a plexiglass globes. And the next one. So we have these globes inserted into the space at different scales, different heights. Some of them function as seating pods with a hood, and the hood is able to be lowered and raised for sound insulation. Some of them are used as skylights or as light fixtures or as DJ booth. This is from the mezzanine looking down from DJ booth's view down into the space.
So the idea is to sort of take this one element and use it in many, obviously for seating, for sound isolation, and then it also transcends through the roof so that you can have the light from the dance floor coming up through the roof, and then during the day you have the light from the roof coming down into the dance floor. If you want to have the bar or just have it as a cafe during the day, you can do that as well. And it sort of creates this connection. People can sit in the pods that are on the roof, but they're actually transcending through the roof and lowering into the space below, so people underneath sort of see these things coming through. And this way creating also a connection between the two spaces through light and drinking and entertainment. And you can see down into the dance floor when you're up on the roof bar.
But then the rooftop becomes a dance floor to itself with the lights coming from down below.
So you kind of make the most of You have one dance floor, but you have two dance floors in a certain sense. And we have a lot of these one-story warehouse buildings now in this meatpacking district area, which are becoming bars, and this is a perfect type of building for doing something like this. This is a cafe for children that we did last year, specifically designed for a place where mothers can bring their children. So all the furniture is very small, and all the surfaces in the cafe are for playing with. So you have an abacus wall that the kids can climb up a little bit or count or move things on. You have over to this. Oops. This is a chalkboard wall. That's a wall for drawing on with crayons. There's a magnetic wall for playing on. And the whole back space is floor-to-ceiling Lego play space. So the idea is that the kids can interact with the architecture as if it were a playground, that nothing is off limits anymore. They can climb the walls, they can build on the walls, they can play with gravity, extend out, build out from the walls and defy gravity. And then there's also a little backyard with a sandbox and a little playhouse. This is actually a high school friend of mine opened this with a friend of hers for an extremely small budget. We built everything ourselves and finished it in a couple of months, but it's a real success. Now everybody, all the neighborhoods want one of these things, because in the winter in New York, what do you do with your kid? You know, you got to like get them somewhere with, you know, you can't take them to a regular cafe or wine bar or something. You got to take them somewhere where they're perfectly welcome. So that, it's been quite a success, that place. This is a, one of the first projects that we built. It's a fashion showroom for Indian clothing manufacturer, actually a very large Indian clothing manufacturer that manufactures like for DKNY and Calvin Klein and these clients, but they also have their own lines of clothing. They also have their own clothing stores. And this was their first showroom in New York, but they were going to be showing many different collections and changing them many different times. So they wanted a fairly flexible space in which they could do that. So all the clothes rods are suspended on monofilament from tracks on the ceiling. That way very quickly change your display. If you have, you know, a buyer coming in the morning for one type of thing and a buyer coming in the afternoon for another type of thing, you can just, you know, quickly move things around, push things out of the way, put the other things. So we basically poured the whole place in white epoxy resin. The furniture as well. We also with a very low budget, simply carved it out of foam and then poured this white epoxy resin over it. And creates this kind of slightly atmosphere that lets the clothes So now to the reason for which we were invited here.